Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Megan and I are so delighted to be speaking with you, and we really hope you've been enjoying the Communicate conference so far and all of the fantastic sessions and speakers that have been speaking before us today. We're really excited to be talking to you about how to create a bang moment in a social media campaign. Before we get to that, we would like to start off by introducing a bit about ourselves and where we come from. And we would really love to hear where you're tuning in from as well and what brings you to the Communicate conference and to our session this afternoon. So please do use the chat function, introduce yourselves and interact with each other. And we also have the Q&A panel on the side. I'm sure you'll be familiar with that from previous sessions. So please do feel free to pop any questions in there if anything comes up at all during the session as we're speaking, and we will do our best to address as many of those questions as we can at the end of the session. We've got some time aside for a Q&A. So to start off, we'd like to talk a little bit about us and where we come from. So Megan and I work at Greenhouse, which is a communications agency working across media and digital communications. And our mission is all about working to drive positive social and environmental impact. And that involves working with a range of incredible people, from entrepreneurs and businesses to activists and nonprofit organizations. And we work across a whole range of sectors, from energy and clean technology to biodiversity and conservation and advocacy. So I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Sunita. I am an account executive on the Purpose and Biodiversity team at Greenhouse. Before I joined Greenhouse, my background was in grassroots climate campaigning. And since I've joined the team, I've worked across a range of different sectors, from food systems transformation to biodiversity and conservation. And I've supported on a range of international campaigns working across media relations and digital and social media activation. So I'll hand over to my fabulous colleague, Meg, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone, and I hope you're having a great day here at Communicate. I know that I love this conference, so I hope you're enjoying it too. And as Sunita said, my name is Megan, and I am a digital account executive here at Greenhouse, and I have the pleasure of working alongside the lovely Sunita. I deliver impactful digital marketing campaigns for businesses looking to create positive change. Be that agricultural certification bodies or working on landmark climate litigation cases. And my background is as well in climate activism. I'm first and foremost a climate activist, and communications is my way of doing that as a full-time job. And it's such a brilliant way to do it. Some of my responsibilities at Greenhouse include social media management, writing stimulating copy, analyzing digital campaigns, and engaging online communities.
Brilliant. Thank you, Meg. So what is on the agenda for today? It would be really brilliant to know what brings you to this session, because it's quite an interesting topic and a way of wording it, calling it a bang moment. So we'd love to know if you think you already know what that is, or whether that's something that's totally new to you and that's why you were interested in this session. But really today is going to be all about uncovering the recipe for what creates a bang moment with a social media campaign, whether that is a flagship climate action event, whether that's the launch of a new video, promoting some new social media channels, or even a press release on the media side of things. We are going to be talking through all those different types of bang moments and more, and we're going to be sharing with you some examples of our favorite campaigns which have waited for that perfect moment to gain maximum impact. And this conference is obviously all about the lead up to COP15 and COP26. This is a huge year and a hugely important time for climate action, as we all know. And so uncovering the recipe for how to create that bang moment is so important in order to gain the impact and the reach that you're trying to gain with your campaigns at the moment, and cutting through the noise, getting your voice heard at a time when there's a lot of conversation about climate, but maybe not all of that conversation is effective or delivering impactful messages. So that's really the key to our session today. And we really hope to hear from you on what you're looking for. And we're going to get to that a little bit more in a moment when we start talking about some of our polls. But in terms of what we're going to talk through today, we're going to start with our top tips and what creates a great bang moment. I've given some examples just now, but we've got lots more to share with you. So we're going to be talking in a little bit more detail through all of those and how they work for different types of campaigns. We're going to be sharing some ideas of bang moments, and we're going to be talking about how to plan your timeline so you can lead up and gain maximum impact as you gear up towards hitting that bang moment. We're going to be sharing some of the tools we love because there are so many tools out there, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming or feel like too much effort to try to understand what all of these different tools do. But here at Greenhouse, we really love using a really wide range of tools to achieve lots of different things within our campaigns. So, and the great thing is that lots of those tools are free as well. So we're going to be talking through those, sharing a bit about how we use some of them, and again, how they can work for different types of campaigns. Then we're going to be sharing some examples of our campaigns and some of the ones that we've really loved, which have achieved a great bang moment. We'll do a little bit of a summary at the end, and then we've got plenty of time for questions. So as I said, please do pop those in the Q&A panel at any time during the session, and we will get to as many of those at the end if we have time. We've also popped our Twitter links on here, so please do feel free to tag Greenhouse and myself and Meg, and we will respond to you on Twitter. We would love for you to engage with us. Equally, if there are any comments or questions which we didn't have time to address during this session, then we would love to hear from you on socials, so please do get in touch. So what creates a great bang moment? There is a huge list of the different types of ways that you can create a bang moment or a launch moment with your social media campaigns, but we put together a little bit of a list here which hopefully covers a few of the different options, and we hope that somewhere in here you'll find something which appeals to your campaign or an idea that you have, and something that maybe you haven't thought of before when you've been planning your campaigns in the past. So the first one is visually appealing with clear branding. Now, this is something that's really straightforward, especially when we think of social media, but particularly the clear branding part is something that we sometimes forget to make sure that our branding and visual identity is really aligned across all aspects of our campaigns. So that means any different social channels that we're using, all the assets that we're creating for social media, making sure that everything is consistent, but also visually attractive with maybe bright colors or designs that are really attention grabbing and will cut through some of that noise on social media, particularly when it comes to the climate conversation. It's really important with a bang moment to make your audience feel something, and there are loads of different ways to do that, and it really depends on your campaign, but it's great to have a think about this at the beginning, and this is something that Meg will come on to when we talk about our timeline. But have a think about what you want your audience to feel. Do you want them to feel maybe more emotional or a sad type of reaction, or is it about getting your audience excited and invigorated to take climate action? This is something really good to think about before you begin. Think about making your content easily shareable. If this is something that you want your audience and users on social media to promote widely on their channels, then try to think about sharing assets that others are going to want to have on their own timelines and on their own social media channels. So this can sometimes mean not being too specific to your campaign and thinking about something which is going to appeal to a wider audience, as well as still containing the messages that you really want to share. It's useful to also think about aligning with a key event or awareness day. If that's relevant to your campaign, then picking a relevant awareness day can be a really great way to have a hook to share a message or a campaign moment that you really want to get across. Fresh research or perspectives can be really useful for a bang moment. Sometimes if you think that your campaign doesn't have enough of an exciting moment to elevate it, then sometimes bringing in fresh research or a new perspective, whether that's some new data or research or an interview, can really help again to elevate the message that you're trying to get across. Newsjacking can be a really useful one to try, particularly if you haven't explored the media side of things before. Essentially, newsjacking means taking a story that is already out there, particularly when it's quite a recent news story, and finding a way to connect that to the message or the campaign that you are promoting. And we'll talk about this more when we share some of our example case studies. Partnership and collaboration with others is a great way to elevate a launch moment. And obviously this is a great place for this, the Communicate conference. There are so many amazing social campaigners probably within this session and also just generally attending the conference. So introduce yourselves to people, meet other people out there, and find ways to collaborate with others with similar messages and campaigns to see how you can support each other and help to promote each other's campaigns. A strong build-up is really important to make sure that you gain enough awareness and engagement on your social channels and with your campaign in the lead up to that crucial launch moment. We also love a good catchy headline or a hashtag, and it's really important to think about what these are before you gear up for that big launch moment. Make sure you decide what your hashtags are going to be so that your audience and your followers can engage with those, reuse those hashtags on their channels, and you can spread your message as far and wide as possible. Finally, embargoed content, again, more on the media side, but potentially relevant for socials as well. This is essentially where you keep your content private until a certain moment or a certain day so that it all launches at the same time. And again, that can be a great way to really concentrate your launch moment within a particular day or a particular week to try and get as much attention on it as possible rather than spreading it out over a long period of time. There are many, many more ways to create bang moments than this, but hopefully this does give you some ideas and starting points for how you could be creating that great launch moment with your campaigns. And now I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Meg to take you through our first poll.
Okay, brilliant. So now you have an idea of how to create a bang moment. We'll go into that in more detail in a second. But first of all, we'd like to know what puts you off creating a bang moment. Perhaps you're unsure what your bang moment could be, unsure why your campaign would need a bang moment, or maybe you're just not sure how to execute a bang moment, or maybe it's something else entirely. So we've just popped in the poll there, and to the right-hand side of your screen, you should be able to vote on which of those options applies to you. And if you do click other, please let us know in the chat, and we'd love to know why. And just so you know, if you haven't used the polls before, you can only see the results if you vote. So please do vote and let us know how you're feeling about why you wouldn't create a bang moment. So I can see the votes coming in. Currently, most people say that they're not sure what their bang moment would be. And of course, we hope that after today, we will have given you a little bit of inspiration and you'll have more of an idea of what bang moments could be and which one would work for you. We've got one vote to say that we're not sure why your campaign would need a bang moment. It's a really good reason. And again, hopefully you'll see the impact from some of the bang moments that we share today from our campaigns, and you'll be able to see how useful and significant they can be. And then finally, we've got not sure how to execute a bang moment. We've got 10 votes for that one. So fingers crossed again that today you'll have a little bit more of an idea of how you could execute your bang moment and some of the tools that you could use to make a bang moment. And then we've got 2 votes for others. So I'm just looking in the chat. We've got Charlie Porter says, how to create a bang moment that cuts through all the other ongoing bang moments. Yeah, it's really difficult to think of a way that you can actually cut through that noise. And I see Simon had mentioned that earlier as well. So a campaign in the run up to COP26, along with almost every organization at the moment. Yeah, exactly. Everyone will be doing some sort of campaign. And I imagine lots of them will have a bang moment. Some of them, the bang moment will be COP26 or COP15, whichever one. And actually, we do have a campaign today that we'd like to share that ran throughout B Corp month. And that was kind of a similar situation on a similar scale. all B Corps throughout B Corp month were sharing campaigns around what it's like to be a B Corp and the positive change that B Corps can make. And it's really hard to cut through the noise when lots of organizations are doing that. So hopefully today we will be able to give a little bit of insight on how we've worked through that in the past. Yeah, brilliant. Moving on, Sunita. Thank you. Okay, so when it comes to getting started and brainstorming your bang moment, the best place to begin with, or we think to begin with, is with research. First of all, you can have a little look at what your competitors are doing, examine what they're up to and what's working for their audience. This is a really great way to actually save time because the work has essentially already been done for you. And then you could also have a little look at social media hashtags and social media more generally to find related content to the topic that you're looking to run a campaign on. So you can find content that is relevant to you and see what other people have done to promote or raise awareness of that topic. Secondly, take a look at using tools like Jamboard, which is a free tool that you can use to crowdsource inspiration. So Jamboard in particular is a giant whiteboard that is online where you and your team can write post-it notes together and brainstorm ideas in a collaborative way, all at the same time. So we'd suggest if you're using a tool like Jamboard that you perhaps start by writing campaigns down that have stood out to you in the past. They don't have to be your own. They can be from other people, and just think about why that has happened. Why did they stand out to you? And you could also have a little look at awards websites. This is a really great way to see what's worked in the past. So you can look at websites such as Campaign and look for really top class campaigns to see what made them so successful. Next, I'd recommend going to consult your audience. Listen to your target audience to learn what they want to see from you. And you can use tools like Oblique Strategies, Answer the Public, Importance Idea Generator to see the kind of questions people are asking around your topic. Just so you know, all the tools mentioned on this slide are free and you can find them online. So please get in touch with either Sunita or myself on Twitter afterwards if you'd like to know a little bit more about them. But I'll give you a brief overview now. So starting with Oblique Strategies. Oblique strategies are a set of statements and questions which are designed to get your brain thinking creatively. They're a set of cards created by Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt, and they are just the most random statements that get your mind darting in different directions. One of the ones that I really like is listen to the quiet one, because I'm a loud person. So having someone in the room who maybe hasn't spoken their mind yet, and it could be even more broad than that, but just, yeah, they get you thinking and send your mind in different directions. The next one I mentioned was Answer the Public. And you can use this to see what people are saying around a specific keyword. So for example, you could type in climate and it would bring up the most common searches that include that word. And that way you can see what people are asking about and also see if you can fill in gaps in the market. Have people's questions actually been answered? And then finally, I mentioned Importance Idea Generator. And this is an interesting one. It's like a random title generator. You type in your topic and it will throw out a title or a question that relates to it. This is really good for when you're writing blogs, but it can also just spark ideas. And it can be, you know, in advance, it can be completely random. So yeah, you've got to take that one with a pinch of salt, but it is really handy to get your brain thinking. Then moving on, the next step we'd recommend for brainstorming a great bang moment idea is to just put your pen to paper, write down the first idea that comes to mind and put it to one side. And I mean, literally, you write it down and you just pop it on one side, because then you can allow your mind to kind of think of more ideas and clear your mind so that you're not just getting stuck on the first one. That happens to me all the time. It's a really good way of just clearing your brain to think of more. And then finally, reach for the stars, because the sky really is the limit when you're thinking of your first idea. Go big, and then once you've got an idea of what you want to do, you can gradually narrow it down until it becomes more realistic for yourself. So you've begun to brainstorm your bang moment. You have an idea of what your bang moment will be, and now you can begin to plan your timeline, making sure that you have adequate time to hit each of these really key events. So I'd recommend that you start off with defining the goals of your campaign and having a clear idea of what you're actually setting out to do and what you want to achieve by it. Then you can decide on a creative direction. What kind of content are you actually going to produce? Will it be a video, a webinar, podcasts, interviews? It can be anything. You just need to make sure you have an idea of what that will be. Next, I'd really recommend choosing the best social media channel for your target audience, if that is something you're going to use. For instance, all of the channels do different things. So maybe if you're looking to target professionals, you'd like to promote your campaign through LinkedIn. Or if you're using your campaign that is orientated towards the youth, or maybe it's consumer-led, have a little look at using Instagram, or perhaps Twitter if you're targeting a more politically minded or climate activist space. But there really are channels tailored for different things. So make sure you have a little look at your target audience and do your research. Now you can develop some assets and some leading copy, such as deciding on a tagline or hashtag, and gather some key quotes that you'll be able to share on social media. And then you can create a content calendar that you can populate with all of this information that you've found, including your taglines and your hashtag. Make sure that you're consistent throughout. Then you can finalize your press release or set up relevant hashtag tracking if that is what you're going to use in your campaign. This is a great way to see how many accounts are using your tagline or your hashtag and see how it's been delivered across your audience. Moving on, you can begin to reach out to your influencers. You could start by sharing a digital toolkit with them if you have one and making them aware of the campaign. Start by building momentum on social media and creating a community, engaging with other channels and building a reputation before your campaign bang moment is even launched. And then this is the really exciting bit. You get to launch your bang moment, and this is where your campaign will actually come together. But it's important to remember the really nerdy bit of reporting and analytics. Make sure that you check out your reporting and analytics, make sure it's all set up for your launch of your bang moment. That way you'll be able to learn for future campaigns. Fab. Okay, so hopefully you have a little idea of the type of bang moments that you could create, how to brainstorm them, and how to plan your timeline ahead of launching your bang moment. These are now some of our favorite tools that we use when we're running a campaign. And lots of them, as you can see, are noted as free, and they can be completely free to use or will have a free version. I'm going to run through some of the lesser known ones now. So starting off with Miro. Miro is a similar platform to Jamboard, which I described earlier. It's another huge whiteboard, virtual whiteboard for brainstorming ideas. And it's a really good way, again, of just having this collaborative ideation approach. The main difference between Jamboard and Miro is that Miro is like a really infinite board that you can scroll along for. I mean, I've never reached the edge. You can scroll and scroll and scroll and keep posting post-it notes. Whereas Jamboard comes in little PowerPoint slides, so you could maybe have a slide for each idea that you're brainstorming. Next, we have Trello. You may have heard of Trello. It's quite commonly used now. It's a project management tool that allows you to assign tasks to certain people, set checklists and deadlines, and manage how you're doing in your progress. Onto social media side of things, we've got Sprout Social and Hootsuite, and both of these are scheduling tools which allow you to plan your content. And both Sprout and Hootsuite have analytics and reporting features, but Sprout also has a more advanced feature, which is social listening, which brings me on to social listening tools. So we have Pulsar. Pulsar is a social listening and audience intelligence tool that uses really in-depth analytics and data to give you social media and audience insights. And similarly, we have Meltwater. It's a similar tool to Pulsar, but it can be used for analyzing media coverage and media coverage monitoring as well. Onto the design side of things, we have Canva and Adobe Spark. These are two really well-known design tools that have lots of templates and make designing easy, even for those who aren't creative-minded. And finally, just some other tools that we use. Slido is a really good tool to have in your bank. It's a digital poll service that allows you to quiz your target audience. When you don't have brilliant polls like the one included on Hopin on the right here, this is a really good alternative. Perhaps you're on Zoom or another platform. Then we have MailChimp. This is an email marketing service, which is brilliant for your newsletters and building momentum in the run up to your campaign. And finally, we've got ReadyMag. And this is a web design tool that is super simple and brilliant for producing landing pages for your campaign. And I'm just going to quickly, before we go into campaigns, I can see some really brilliant questions in the chat. I don't know if you guys can see the Q&A function, but it'd be super handy if you could pop some of the questions in there as well, because it just allows us to track them more and they don't get lost in the chat that happens, that's more general and less question orientated. But yeah, we will get back to those really soon and speak about them in our little question section. But for now, we have discussed what a bang moment is, how to brainstorm one. We've outlined a rough timeline and the tools to aid that process. And now we'd like to share some of our favorite bang moments from our campaigns at Greenhouse. So let's get started. So the first campaign that we'd like to share with you is the London Climate Action Week. You may have heard of this. It's an annual flagship climate event that has been running for the last 3 years. And it's where world-leading climate professionals and communities across London get together and celebrate and discuss climate action in the capital, as well as also nationally and internationally. And it's actually the largest independent climate change event in Europe. So our objective for this campaign was to engage key stakeholders virtually and build on the success of last year's London Climate Action Week event, as well as trying to reach a more international audience. And our approach to this involved creating a digital toolkit, which we shared with the stakeholders so that they could deliver consistent messaging around the event. We developed a range of assets and quote cards with a distinctive brand identity. And we also produced a film and accompanying teaser videos that showcase some key climate figures. And then finally, we pitched the launch of the Climate Action Week to both national and international media. So what was our bang moment? Our bang moment was releasing the launch film, which featured Nick Mabey, Marlene Mahera, and Harriet Lamb, 3 very influential climate figures. And one of you in the chat earlier discussed kind of why you would need a bang moment. And so I wanted to talk to you about the impact that this had. So the launch film and teaser videos resulted in 118,000 views, and London Climate Action Week generated nearly 400 pieces of coverage, including coverage in many key national and international publications, such as you can see, Reuters, Bloomberg, Forbes, and Sky News. Brilliantly, London Climate Action Week's social media channels also did really well. We hit 5,000 followers on Twitter, 2,000 on LinkedIn, and received fantastic engagements, including retweets from influential accounts such as COP26 and the City of London. And combined, these 2 accounts have over 150,000 followers, which is great traction for the campaign. So here are some of our key learnings from this campaign. It's really important that you always go back and work out what went well and what went wrong. So yeah, firstly, one of the things we did during this campaign was share a weekly communications plan with the stakeholders to gather their feedback. And this really helped to develop a unified voice and connected community. It was brilliant for them to be able to have their say in what we were doing. We had a longer lead time for this campaign of around 6 weeks on social media, and that allowed us to engage more with and between key stakeholders, which then resulted in more momentum in the run-up to the event. We found that developing the social templates in Canva, which was the tool I mentioned earlier, meant that more stakeholders created their own assets, which were personalized to their followers and received more traction as a result, because they knew what would work with their followers, and that's how they did it. And then lastly, we had a media strategy. So having a media strategy won't always be appropriate for your campaigns, but in this case, we had really high level stakeholders on board, which was kind of a surefire way to get press coverage and interest from the media. So it's always worth having a little look at who is involved in your campaign and working out whether it'd be a good time to have a media strategy involved. So that's the London Climate Action Week. I'm now going to move on to Sunita, who will run us through another of our favourite campaigns.
Brilliant. Thanks, Meg. It's so interesting to hear about London Climate Action Week, which is such a huge flagship climate action event. And now going over to the Just Rural transition, and something that I think some of you have mentioned with the poll results and in the chat, which is all about cutting through the noise at a big event, whether that is something like COP26 or COP15, or in this case with the Just Rural transition, it was the United Nations Food Systems pre-summit event. And so we're going to talk about how the Just Rural transition were one of many organizations and groups and businesses trying to get their message across at this event, and how they managed to cut through the noise and get the message across to the people who needed to hear it. So just some context to start with, the Just Rural Transition is a group whose work is really all about connecting different stakeholders within the food systems transformation world. So that involves making connections between the food producers, the farmers, the rural and indigenous communities who produce our food, right up to governments, policymakers, and those making the decisions about the transition to sustainable agriculture, which is affecting those people and groups that I mentioned. So it's really about starting a conversation, getting input from lots of different people, and most importantly, focusing on those farmer and food producer voices. So in this case, with the UNFSS pre-summit, the objective with this campaign was all about raising awareness of the Just Rural Transition's mission, generating support in particular for their mission of repurposing subsidies to food and agriculture. So quite a specific goal and idea which they were trying to gain more traction with, and really trying to cut through all the noise and the different ideas and conversations at the UNFSS pre-summit, and really trying to get that message across. So in this case, our approach was, first of all, to develop a list of key stakeholders who were involved with the summit and who were making the decisions, speaking and participating. So once we had done that and we had created our list, we tagged them in relevant content in the lead up to the pre-summit. So going back to Megan's timeline, which she mentioned earlier, it's so important to think about what the launch moment is going to look like right before, sort of in the lead up before it's happening. So that's why we were already thinking about tagging stakeholders, getting the Just Rural transition and its mission onto people's radars before the pre-summit event actually took place. So following on from that, we also tweeted at key stakeholders to invite them to the event. It's obviously really important to do this in a way where the content you are directing at these stakeholders is relevant and interesting to them. So we did our research beforehand. We made sure we knew what areas of food systems transformation these stakeholders were involved in before we sent them messages or direct tweeted at them. And we made sure all the content that we sent to them was tailored to their interests so that they felt like it was relevant for them. We produced bespoke assets and a digital toolkit for event speakers and for the Just Rural Transition's wider network. So this was a really useful thing to do to ensure that stakeholders and general participants at the summit felt that they had some control over what was going on their social media, being shared on their timeline. They had some assets which contained their quotes or their photos, which were much more shareable for them and were interesting for their audiences who may not be aware of the Just Rural transition. So they were able to create that link between the Just Rural transition and their networks of often highly influential followers. We also live tweeted from multiple events throughout the pre-summit event. So not just the Just Rural Transition's own event, which they hosted at the pre-summit, but also multiple other external events which were taking place. And this really helped to position the Just Rural Transition as a thought leader, show that we had commentary and insight to add on the other events that were taking place. And it also helped to build really positive relationships with these stakeholders that we wanted to interact with and that we wanted to hear our messages, because it showed that we were engaged with what they were saying. It wasn't just all about the Just Rural Transition. It was very much trying to start a conversation and showing that we were interested in what everybody else was saying, as well as being an authority on the subject of food systems transformation. So you can see on the right-hand side there some of the event assets which we produced that we were sharing on both our own channels and giving to our speakers and participants to share. So that brings me to our bang moment, which was the Just Rural Transition's own affiliated session at the UN Food Systems pre-summit. So what was the impact of this? Well, the Just Rural Transitions affiliated session saw 80 attendees, which compared to those figures we were seeing before for London Climate Action Week may seem like a tiny number, but this is despite the timing of the event clashing with numerous other affiliated sessions. So it was really great to see those people attending and really engaging with the session. It's worth coming back to the fact that the objective for this campaign was very, very different to something like London Climate Action Week. And it was really all about very targeted messaging and trying to reach those high-level decision-making stakeholders involved in the pre-summit and getting them to hear our messages. So it was less about really high numbers and reach figures and all about who the people were that we were actually reaching. So to continue with our impact, the Just Rural Transitions tweets promoting our event received engagement from some really high-profile policymakers and stakeholders. One example being the UK's international champion on adaptation and resilience for the COP26 presidency. I'm sure many of you have heard of Anne-Marie Trevelyan and probably follow her. And also the French account for the World Bank, which has millions of followers, but again, is a very relevant account and involves many important policymakers when it comes to food systems transformation. So what were our key learnings for this campaign? As Meg said earlier, so important to come back and reflect on what we learned and what worked well and possibly what didn't work so well. So in this case, one of the things that came out of this campaign was that video assets provide fantastic shareable content for stakeholders. This is also very relevant, of course, for London Climate Action Week, which Meg just talked about. In this case, the video asset we actually produced for the Just Rural Transitions affiliated session, and it was a video containing remarks from two national ministers, which we then shared later across our social media. After the pre-summit event, we were actually approached by the United Nations Committee for Food Security, who asked us if they could reshare the video on their social channels. So that was a fantastic engagement. And we think it really came about as a result of the fact that that video was such great shareable content. It obviously involved some high-level people, but it was also something that was generally talking about the mission of food systems transformation, rather than being something which was very personal and specific to the Just Rural Transition. So it made it really shareable while also getting across the Just Rural Transition's mission really clearly. We also learned through this campaign that translated posts and assets really enabled us to reach a wider audience. So this is not going to be relevant for every single campaign, but in this case, the Just Rural Transition is a really internationally focused group looking at the impacts on farmers and food producers across the world and trying to engage as many different stakeholders as possible. So it was really important to try to make our content as widely accessible and reachable as possible. So we translated some of our posts and assets into French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Bahasa Indonesian. And that meant that we were able to reach some highly influential people and accounts that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to reach. So the French account for the World Bank, which I mentioned earlier, is a great example of that. We found that direct tweeting at stakeholders produced really positive responses. When we tailored that content to them, we found that they engaged with our tweets and sent us really positive responses, whether that was confirming that they would attend our event or resharing the tweets that we posted to them. We also found that the Just Rural transition received high engagement by live tweeting, using quotes, screenshots from the pre-summit event, and especially tagging speakers and participants. As I mentioned before, it was a fantastic way to build positive relationships with most of these stakeholders, showing we were interested in what they were saying. We thought their content was really valuable and that it aligned with the Just Rural Transition's mission. So live tweeting, or generally going live during a flagship climate action event or whatever type of event it is that's relevant to your campaign, is something that I would really, really recommend, because sometimes the moment when something's happening is really important, and the level of engagement and attention that your posts get might actually decrease after that moment has passed. So it's not always going to be something that's relevant again for your campaign, but going live, particularly during an event, is something that could be really crucial for maximizing the impact of your launch moment. So I'll hand back over to Meg to talk about our Beyond Net Zero campaign.
Thank you. I just wanted to say quickly, thank you for putting your questions in the Q&A. We will get through those at the end in our questions section, and I've seen some really, really good ones. So thank you so much for engaging and popping those in there. Keep them coming. So yeah, the next campaign that we wanted to showcase is the Beyond Net Zero campaign. And this campaign was all about showcasing the commitments of B Corps and celebrating B Corp Month. And we ran this campaign internally. It wasn't on behalf of the client. Just thought I'd give you that context there. But yes, so as I was saying earlier, the challenge with running a campaign during B Corp Month is that just about every B Corp will be running one. And there are a lot of us now, which is really, really great, but it does mean that there's a lot of noise. So as fellow B Corps would be doing the best to shout about just how good it is to be a B Corp and the power that B Corps have to make change, we really had to find a way to stand out. And that's why for this campaign, we created our own brand identity. And our aim was to be in line with the B Corp's branding and the branding that they'd be putting out for B Corp Month, but to still have our own feel and our own look that would be recognizable as Greenhouse. So that's where Beyond Net Zero campaign came in. And our mission was to celebrate the B Corps who have committed to net zero and are looking beyond that. So throughout B Corp Month, we created a landing page to host a series of interviews that we had run with some of the UK's leading B Corps, such as Toastdale and Dane, the period product company. And then finally, on the last day of B Corp Month, we hosted a brilliant webinar, if I do say so myself, featuring some of the UK's most trailblazing B Corps. So what impact did our bang moment have for Beyond Net Zero? Well, our hashtag that we created, the Beyond Net Zero hashtag, reached over 1.09 million Twitter timelines. We gained over 5.1 thousand engagements on social media and over 900 new followers across our channels. We also had 130 people attending the webinar, so it certainly had a bang, which is brilliant to see. So here are some of our key learnings that we learned from this campaign. We found that it was great to have a landing page as a hub for our information and to host our interviews, blogs, and also to promote our webinar. We also found that hosting a webinar virtually meant that we gained more traction as we had viewers from across the globe. Perhaps that could be one of the upsides of the pandemic. Virtual webinars have been great, in my opinion. However, we arguably took on too much with this campaign. We hosted interviews, we wrote blogs, we developed a creative identity, we developed a landing page and coordinated a webinar. And that was a lot of work in a single month, if not too much. So one of our key takeaways here would be to give ourselves a longer lead time or just to do less, because we created so much content that we wanted to share it. But then we felt that perhaps we'd flooded our social media channels. I know, Philippa, you were talking in the chat about this drip format that you're doing with Living Language Land. and you're feeding 2 words a week across 13 weeks on social media. And that sounds like a brilliant way to do it, because we found that we kept sharing information and we tried to condense it into B Corp month, and we just didn't give ourselves enough time. So yeah, one of our key takeaways would be doing less is more. Give yourself enough lead time, and perhaps make sure that you're using your resources efficiently and effectively. This was one of my favorite campaigns to run because we had so many learnings from it. And internally, it had a very different vibe from the campaigns we ran for our clients. That's that one. Thank you, Sunny.
Lovely. And that brings us on to our final example, which we're going to share with you today. And then I'm really excited to come on to all of the brilliant questions which you guys have been popping into the Q&A. Thank you so much for those. So the last campaign that we would like to share with you is our Future Food Maker campaign for EIT Food, which was all about recruiting the next generation of food systems champions. So again, for a little bit of context, EIT Food is Europe's largest agri-food innovation network, and they work across a huge range of different areas, from education to innovation and research. But in this case, our campaign was really all about looking to the next generation and trying to find those young people who are going to become our food systems transformation champions for the future. So really the objective here was raising awareness and encouraging key stakeholders in food systems transformation to share our recruitment campaign for the future food makers. So what was our approach? First of all, sounds simple, but it was really making sure that we created the right hashtag, as well as a digital toolkit for stakeholders to share. It's worth mentioning because a digital toolkit has come up in quite a few of the campaigns that we've talked about, in case you might not be aware of what a digital toolkit is or what might be included in one. This is usually some form of toolkit which could contain, for example, template social media posts for whatever social media channels you would prefer your audience to share your campaign on. Meg mentioned earlier about picking the right social channels depending on who it is you're really trying to target. So you might produce template posts for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. It really depends on your campaign. And then often these toolkits also include assets which your audience can share, and they might be customizable assets, for instance, in a platform like Canva, where your audience can add their photos, their quotes, their logos, or however it is that you would like them to customize your asset so that they can share it with their audiences on their channels. And the reason that you've seen this come up in so many of our examples is that it is such an effective way to encourage other people to share campaigns. Often people will not necessarily want to retweet or share something if they can't make it personal to them. And so giving people that control to add whatever they want to the asset, or tweak the social post a little bit while still making sure it retains your brand identity, really helps to encourage your audience to share and promote. It's also important to really think about that hashtag. So in this case, it went through quite a few iterations, going back and forth with EIT Food and ourselves to make sure that we'd really captured the right information, as well as making the hashtag something that was exciting, attention grabbing for our audiences. So we settled on Future Food Maker because this was a really great compromise between being specific to our campaign, which was all about recruiting the next generation of food systems transformation champions, but also about picking something which was generic enough that a wider audience would want to share it on our timeline. So that's why, for example, we didn't include EIT Food or any jargon in the hashtag. It made it something that was really shareable. The next part of our approach was to conduct a survey of Gen Z opinions on the food system to act as a hook for media. So a media strategy was really important to try and elevate this campaign as much as possible, but we knew that the recruitment campaign alone wasn't going to be enough to grab the attention of media, and we wouldn't get much coverage with that on its own. So that's why we conducted this survey, so that we had that fresh research and fresh insight that I was mentioning earlier to act as a hook for us to then talk about the recruitment campaign and get that out there as widely as possible. We also developed, yes?
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. You're doing absolutely great. I'm just really wary that we've only got 6 minutes left, and I've seen some brilliant questions. So we've obviously got carried away with ourselves. So just to let you know that we have 6 minutes left until the end of the session. So it'd be great to get round to some of the questions we have too. And we will be sharing our slides afterwards, so you'll be able to see the impact that the EIT food campaign had. But I'd love to answer some of their questions as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Let's definitely prioritize getting to those questions. So yeah, I mean, that is pretty much it for EIT Food. Our Bang moment was all about releasing that Gen Z report alongside the recruitment campaign. And obviously the reason this case study is in here is because it had a fantastic impact, and we're really excited that we've got over 75 young people already applying to become a future food maker, and hopefully we'll see many more in the days and weeks to come. So yeah, I completely agree with Meg. I would love to get to the questions and see what's been going on in that Q&A panel. So I will hop on over to the other tab. Meg, if you want to start on some of the questions.
Yes, I'll read them out, Sunita. We've had some really great ones. One of the ones that I thought was really fantastic was how, which tip would you prioritize when you have limited resources, a small team, lack of budget? And I think one of the things I wanted to mention, and I'll let you answer this, Sunita, in a second as well, is that it's really important to use the tools that we mentioned earlier, the free ones, to make sure that you're being as efficient as possible. And it allows you to kind of give yourself more time and use your resources in a really useful way. So one of the things we did for the Beyond Net Zero campaign that was quite cost effective was running a webinar on Zoom. So that was obviously a time burden, but it was free for us to do. So we hosted the webinar on Zoom using our connections and our network to bring in influential people and stakeholders who could talk about going beyond net zero. So if you don't have the budget to do, an incredible video and animation or host like a podcast, what you could do is have a recording of yourself doing a webinar on Zoom. I think that's a really great way to do it. So that's one of my tips. I don't know if you have any tips for this person, Sunita.
Yeah, I love that, Meg. I think that's really, really great advice. I think that because I work with media as well as on the digital and social side of things, I think to bring in a bit of a media perspective, I think newsjacking is a really great way to go about this here with a limited budget and time and resources, because this is something where you just sort of wait for it to come to you, really. And I imagine as, climate campaigners, we're following the news a lot, probably seeing things popping up on our Twitter and social feeds all the time. So when you see a story that is relevant to your campaign, then jump on it, whether that is creating social copy to act as a hook for whatever's happening, whether that is drafting a press release, obviously, if that is something you have the time and resources to do. But there are so many different ways to use newsjacking. It doesn't have to be as big as writing a press release and pitching to media. It could just be a case of creating content for your social channels that is showing that you're connecting it with whatever is in the news at the moment, but then linking it back to your campaign and your messaging. So yeah, definitely just following the news in general and finding ways to connect current news stories and topics with your campaign is just a really good thing to just generally keep up with.
Brilliant. Hopefully that answered your question, but do tweet us if it didn't. Next, we have a question from Charlie Porter. She said, they say, what if you want a campaign that has more longevity than just the bang moment? Are there other stages for how to sustain the engagement? And one of the things that I know we have done around sustaining engagement after a bang moment is, or the tip that I would suggest is having a landing page, or kind of like maybe just a tab on your website, or a section on, I don't know, I've just completely forgotten my idea there. But basically, if you have an area, a hub of all of the information that was part of your bang moment, you can then have direct people back to it and continually, post more content to it and continue with that engagement. Remember to continue to post the evergreen content that you've created. For instance, for the Beyond Net Zero campaign, continue to post the podcast that we've done with leading B Corps, because that content is still relevant today. So that is one way that you can sustain your bang moment, by having all of that information in one place and continuing to redirect to it. I don't know if you had any tips. I know we've only got 1 minute. I could do one more question.
Yeah, I thought that was a fantastic answer, Meg. Nothing to add really there.
Okay.
I can see there's one more great question, which is an example of the timeline for one of these campaigns. I know that for the London Climate Action Week campaign, which Meg started with, that was about a 6-week lead time. So from sort of starting to define goals and objectives, starting to prepare those comms plans up until the bang moment. So, you know, these campaigns have really varied in timeline, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the lead time for a campaign of that scale and size. But yeah, like Meg, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just gonna hop on over to our thank you slide. And just to say, as Meg has already reiterated, please do drop us messages on social media, tag us on Twitter if you would like to follow up with any questions or comments. But I believe that brings us to the end of the session. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Sorry we did have to skip over a few things there at the end, but we've really loved speaking with you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.